right, let's continue our discussion on the circulatory system. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about arteries. Okay, arteries are the vessels that carry blood away from the heart. Okay, doesn't matter if it's oxygenated or deoxygenated, but arteries carry blood away from the heart. So when blood leaves the right ventricle to go to the lungs, it's leading through the pulmonary artery. So even though it's deoxygenated, it's still in an artery. So the old wives' tale about arteries carry oxygenated blood and veins carry deoxygenated blood is wrong. Okay? Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Now, because they are carrying blood away from the heart, they are under a higher pressure than veins. Okay? The blood that leaves the heart is getting shot out of the heart at a pretty good pressure, and it's going straight into the arteries. The arteries are designed a little bit differently than a vein too. So, we have our arteriole, I don't want to say arteriole because that's small, so we're going to say arteriole. Note the difference, okay? Arteriole wall. And our arteriole wall looks like this, okay? And we're all fairly familiar with fire hoses. Well, you might not be, but you and the rest of you guys who will see this at some other point in time, you're pretty familiar with fire hoses. So you know that fire hoses can hold a lot of pressure because of the way they're designed, right? So if we look at this, this is a cross-section of our arteriole wall. And this is the outside of our arteriole wall. Man, that's hard to say. Inside our arteriole wall, we have quite a bit of muscle. And that muscle constricts and relaxes based on the current needs of our arteries. Okay? Now, along with the arteriole wall and the muscle that's in here, we have these little things inside our arteries that are called sphincters. And sphincters can necessarily close off the artery if we need it to. Okay? So anytime the artery constricts, our muscle pulls that closed. Where's my red marker? Our muscle will pull our artery closed. And we have much less space for our blood to pass through. Why is that a necessity?
So you don't bleed to death?
It might be so you don't bleed to death. Why else?
Well, it opens up when you need more blood flow to a certain area, more oxygen, let's say running or working out.
Okay, so we can wind up with one this is pretty wide open right here, right? So this is dilated. This is constricted.
Constricted is probably fight or flight kind of situation, so you're passing out because somebody stuck a needle in your arm, right?
Okay, that would be psychogenic shock, and soon we'll get to types of shock. But that's a really good path to be going down. Fight or flight results in vasoconstriction of a lot of your unnecessary vessels. So your capillaries, your arterioles, your venules won't constrict because venules don't constrict. They don't really have muscle tissue to constrict. But all of those vessels that can constrict will constrict to pull blood away from your not needed body parts. So where does that blood come from? Where do those vessels constrict at? We already discussed that they constrict on the skin surface. Are there other places that it might constrict? If we're in fight or flight, we're getting ready to run.
Afraid. Right.
Okay, we lose higher functioning, right? Because higher functioning is not necessary when it's time to either fight or flee. Okay, so we lose that higher functioning. We don't lose our hindbrain. Our hindbrain stays oxygenated, but we do lose the higher reasoning part of our brain. What else happens in fight or flight? blood stops flowing to our digestive system.
That's why if you're stressed out long enough, you'll have digestive problems.
Yeah. Why? Why does blood stop flowing to the digestive system with a fight or flight response?
Because the need to digest something at that point, whatever's causing you to be in a fight or flight, isn't needed at that to survive.
Right. Yeah, you don't need that food that's stuck in your stomach right now to survive. You might need your quadriceps, your glutes, you might need those to survive, right? So we continue with good blood flow to our major muscle groups, but we stop blood flow to our digestive organs. Okay? And that happens because the muscles in our arteries can contract or expand as needed. Now, the muscles or the arteries are under pressure all the time. They don't ever have a point in time when they're under pressure. You were talking a little bit earlier that you currently have a systolic blood pressure of 130. What does systolic mean?
The pressure going out of your heart?
Both of them are pressure going out of your heart, but what is the systolic part?
I don't know.
Mariah, do you remember what systolic pressure is? No? Okay. Systolic pressure is the pressure that's placed on the inside. Go ahead. Systolic pressure is the pressure that's placed on the inside of the arterial wall during contraction of the ventricles. Okay? So, when the ventricles contract, and when your pump on your engine revs up, and it pushes water out through the hose, okay, you can set your pump pressure to 1500, whatever, 1500, I don't even know anymore. But you can set it to a specific amount, right? Well, the pump in your heart doesn't actually work that way. There's always pressure in it, but when you contract it, like a hand pump, if you contract it like a hand pump, there's more pressure during the contraction. And that's what your systolic measurement is. So what's your diastolic measurement?
The pressure against arterial walls when the heart is not contracting?
Yeah, it's the pressure against the arterial walls, diastolic, during relaxation of the ventricles. So your blood pressure is currently 130 over 90, right?
130 over 100.
130 over 100, okay? So when your heart is contracting, you have a pressure against your arterial walls of 130 millimeters of mercury. Okay? When your heart is relaxing, or your ventricles are relaxing, you still have a pressure against your arterial walls of 100 millimeters of mercury. So these arterial walls are under pressure all the time, which is why they're built differently than veins. Okay? Once the blood flows through the arteries, we go from the arteries to the arterioles. Arterioles are smaller, but they're still carrying blood away from the heart. Okay? We go through the arterioles and we get into the capillaries. What happens at the capillary beds?
Diffusion process.
We have diffusion that happens at the capillary beds. What happens to the pressure of your blood?
That's probably where it's at the least.
That's where it's at the least. Because you're into smaller and smaller vessels, okay, until you get down to these microscopic capillaries that they're small enough that oxygen and carbon dioxide can diffuse across those membranes without too much trouble. When the blood then leaves the capillaries and it goes into your venules, there's no pressure left. There's no pressure left. So your venules, they don't have to be built like your arteries. If you hunt. Have you ever looked at the difference between an artery and a vein in something that you've killed? Next time you kill something, you should take a look at it because it's really kind of cool. But veins, they're just floppy. They don't have any pressure. They don't need to take care of any pressure. And because there's no pressure in your veins or in your venules, blood only moves back to your heart because of the pressure that your heart has sent through the arteries. So your veins, your venules, are built a little bit differently. Remember how we talked about having sphincters in here? Okay? Well, in your veins, you have valves. So if you have a valve that's built like this is a valve in our heart, or excuse me, this is a valve in our vein, and we're going from our legs up or our arms up. If you have a valve that's built like this and your heart pumps, pushes blood through your arteries, your arterioles, your capillaries, your venules, your veins, and then it relaxes, what's going to happen to the blood in your veins if you don't have this valve here?
It's going to pool into the lowest spots.
Yeah, it's going to just continue to flow back down, right? So we have these valves in our veins that close. And they prevent gravity from they prevent blood from flowing back due to gravity. So these valves, and everybody has them in their veins, they close. We could probably find the valves in your veins, maybe in yours. We could probably see them. If we put a tourniquet on you like we were going to do an IV, we could probably find the valves in your veins pretty easy because they stand out. Okay?
They're just thicker or what?
Yeah, they look like a bump.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how blood gets back to the heart. The heart contracts the ventricles push blood out through the arteries, into the arterioles, through the capillaries, from the capillaries into the venules, and back into the veins. So your heart is responsible, that one pump of your heart is responsible for pushing blood throughout your entire system. There's not another spot in your body that pushes blood back. So if you can imagine, when you get through the capillaries and over into the venules and the veins, there's not much pressure here. So these work simply by stopping the backflow of blood. So then the next time the heart pumps, you push a little bit more through your veins. And when the heart relaxes, the valves collapse again. It's kind of cool. I think it's kind of cool. Okay. All right, we're going to talk just briefly about the spleen. It's not actually part of the circulatory system, but it's included here because it has a very important function. Mariah, I know you know what it is because we just talked about it. What is the function of the spleen?
It holds blood in it, and then if you start losing a whole bunch of blood, it sends the blood that it has in it out to your body.
Right. So the spleen filters or processes blood. And because it filters or processes blood, at any time it has about 450 milliliters of blood stored in it. Because it has about 450 milliliters of blood stored in it, if you have a large amount of blood loss, the spleen can get squeezed and push that 450 milliliters of blood out of the spleen and into your circulatory system. It's kind of a reserve chute, right?
So
if you're a parachuter, it's kind of a reserve chute. What?
If you have a ruptured spleen, then what is that?
You're going to bleed a lot.
If you have a ruptured spleen, then your spleen can't hold the blood anymore. Your spleen usually has to be removed. All right. What is blood made of?
Red blood cells?
Okay. Red blood cells. Let's talk about, it is made of red blood cells. So let's start with the largest part of our blood. What is the largest part of our blood?
Plasma.
Plasma. You've all seen plasma, whether you recognize it or not. What does it look like?
It's the yellowish part.
It's the yellowish part. When might you have seen it?
Tattoos.
Okay, you've seen it from tattoos. When else might you see it?
When do you see it from a tattoo?
It oozes out of the tattoo after it's like freshly done.
Interesting.
Like serous fluid, like from a burn. When else might you see plasma?
When you're donating it.
When you're donating it. That would be a good reason or a good time to see it. Okay, what is plasma made of?
Water.
Water,
Proteins.
plasma is made of water. How much of plasma is water?
92%.
Protein is how much?
7%.
What else do you have, right?
Oxygen.
Oxygen.
Oh, carbon dioxide. Nitrogen. Nutrients. Cellular waste.
So a whole lot of stuff.
A whole lot of stuff, yeah. Now, this oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, nutrients, waste, and miscellaneous is only 1% of plasma. Okay, the parts of the blood that you need to know a little bit about are erythrocytes. What is erythrocyte?
Red blood cells.
Okay, erythrocytes, leukocytes, what's leukocytes?
White blood cells.
Okay, and platelets. What are platelets responsible for?
The clotting of the blood.
They're responsible for the clotting of the blood. Red blood cells carry hemoglobin. And what is hemoglobin responsible for? Do you remember the conversation we... Yeah, do you remember the conversation that we had about our SpO2 monitors and how our SpO2 monitors work? Hemoglobin is responsible for carrying oxygen. So our erythrocytes carry hemoglobin and hemoglobin carries oxygen. What are white blood cells used for?
Defense mechanisms.
They're a defense mechanism. They fight infections.
So if you have an infection, that's why your white blood cell count is really high.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten an infection on a cut or something and you can see the clear stuff that's inside the infection? That's your white blood cells doing their job. And what are platelets responsible for? Clotting. There's actually quite a process to how your body clots, and we'll talk about that when we get to trauma. Okay, we talked a little bit about the sympathetic nervous system and the fact that the sympathetic nervous system causes us to have a fight or flight response. What chemical is pumped into our body by the sympathetic nervous system that causes that fight or flight response?
Isn't there two chemicals?
There's one that causes the feed or breed response, and there's one that causes the fight or flight response.
Adrenaline?
Adrenaline causes the fight or flight response. Okay, so adrenaline or if you are talking about it out here, we call it epinephrine. Okay, the chemical one is epinephrine. Adrenaline causes what to happen to your heart?
Speed up.
It causes your heart rate to increase. What else does it cause? We talked about how it causes vasoconstriction in some places and vasodilation in others. What else does it cause?
Breathing speeds up.
Yeah, it causes an increased respiratory rate. So along with that increased respiratory rate, what's going to happen to our bronchioles and our alveoli?
You're gonna expand.
Yeah, we're going to have bronchodilation, right? Okay. So we have an increased heart rate, we have an increased respiratory rate. What else do we have? Along with our increased heart rate, what else is our heart going to do? Not only is it going to pump faster, it's also going to pump harder. So we're going to have an increase in blood pressure. Okay. Now, if we have the opposite of this, so this is called adrenaline or epinephrine. What's the opposite of this?
Noradrenaline.
Noradrenaline or norepinephrine? Okay, and what's going to happen when our sympathetic nervous system, or excuse me, our parasympathetic nervous system secretes noradrenaline?
Vasoconstriction.
Pardon?
Basically the opposite of all that.
Yeah, it slows it all down. Now, these work together. They're considered antagonistic. They're considered antagonistic because they have opposite effects, but they work together, so they're really complementary.
So you mean your body's producing them both at the same time?
And it releases them when it's needed. Okay, where are adrenaline and noradrenaline made? Think about it, it's in the name. In the adrenal glands. Where are your adrenal glands located? Kidney man, where are your adrenal glands located?
On the kidney?
On the kidneys. All right. You guys have questions about the cardiovascular system?
Where are they at on the kidneys?
They are kind of on the top and behind. You can't see them here. If you go to the endocrine system, you'll get a better look at them. Okay, no more questions about the circulatory system? Do we understand what happens in the circulatory system? Yeah, we're golden?